I'm Corey Mason, Delivery Partner, Project Support and Assurance Workstream Lead. On the call today, we have other members of the Delivery Partner, and our speaker for today's session is Russell Irwin, who's the Support and Remediation Lead. This is one of a series of Wave 2.2 SHDF grant recipient group engagement sessions. The sessions will provide you with information to support you to deliver your SHDF Wave 2.2 project. Today, we'll provide you with an overview of project monitoring and reporting, followed by our audit and assurance processes. The format of today will be a 30-minute presentation, followed by a question panel related to today's content. The panel will last for up to 30 minutes. The session is being recorded, and we'll make it available after the session, along with the slides. Please add questions into the chat during the presentation. If you appear in the chat as a guest, then could you please add your name to the question so that we can invite the right person to speak. These will then be directed to the Q&A panel at the end. Any project-specific questions should be directed towards your SPOC following your initial kickoff meeting, or any urgent questions would go to your regional lead once you've got those details in the interim. Your cameras and mics have been disabled, and they'll be re-enabled once the question panel begins. I'll now hand over to Russell Irwin, who'll be our speaker for today. Over to you, Russell.
Good afternoon, everybody. Before we get going, just want to touch on a point that was raised yesterday with reference to the accounts reporting requirements within the grant offer letter. So an update on the reason behind Schedule 2 and the accounts reporting requirement is it was set up in Wave 2.1 as part of the payments process where funding is issued rather than being paid up front. So Schedule 2 is there to assure that that spend has been made in line with those requirements. So it's safeguarding against fraud and error, and all the checks and balances are done properly and the grant is accounted for. So there are plans for further support for grant recipients on the payment processes, and those will be announced in due course. Okay. So without further ado, into today's session. So this is project monitoring, reporting and assurance. So it sounds like a bit of a mouthful to get through in one session, but you'll see how all this ties together to help you identify risks to your delivery. And hopefully it'll successfully provide you with the necessary outputs you need to validate the outcomes of your projects. So next slide, please. So our agenda for today, I won't read those out, but those are the points we'll be going through. We'll look at some of the processes and the inputs from both yourselves and the SPOC into these. Next slide, please. So just before we start, we've added a little note there with some of the acronyms for the project. Just as a reminder there, some of the things you'll hear today. So those are the main ones that we'll be discussing, so they'll crop up quite often in the conversations. So next slide, please. So the customer journey. So it's essential that you embed good project management practices into your project. So this allows both you and us to track your progress against the agreed baseline. So this gives us as the delivery partner, so the visibility of your projects, and allows us to identify how best we can support you, ideally by spotting where issues may arise before they happen. So a key factor in project monitoring is the ability to identify, track and manage risks and issues. So that will make sure that we are giving you the right amount of priority for what they need. And fundamentally, we are all motivated to do this work so that we can improve the lives of the people who need this work to their homes. Good project management will give us the confidence that what we are delivering has been done to the right quality, and we can increase the confidence through good record keeping. So equally as important is the need to keep all of our interested parties up to date on the progress, so our stakeholders, so ensuring that the commitments that we are given at the highest levels can be reported in a timely manner. And lastly, we have the processes in place to track that spend and give transparency as to how it's been allocated and utilised, and gives the assurance that error and potentially misuse of funds is being effectively scrutinised. So all of these processes are time-bound, and we need to work together to get the data we need into the systems each month that will allow us to track that flow of information. Next slide, please. So the monthly upload cycle for reporting. If you need to zoom in to see this in more detail, it's fairly big on my screen, but if you need to zoom in, please use the control and scroll function and it'll zoom in on your screen. So as you're about to go through the first monthly submission in the next few weeks, most of you on the call should now be familiar with the monthly data upload template that you've been issued. And you'll start to understand that so it's your primary responsibility to complete that monthly data upload and get that into the system using the .gov.uk portal. So the target for this is the 10th working day of each month. And it's essential that you set up your own internal processes working back from that date, ideally with a little bit of float, to get it in on time and have it done after your own quality checks. And most important for those leads amongst you where you are in a consortia, that you relay this with your consortia members so they can feed into the information for your project and you can then have the time to prepare your consolidated report. And once that report is received in the system, it undergoes a number of checks behind the scenes. And if corrections are needed, then the report will need to be resubmitted. Okay. Now that can impact on the effectiveness of your meetings. So it's something that we need to avoid wherever possible. Your SPOC will use information that you've submitted to have a focused conversation with you to explore any queries and gather more background information where needed. But make sure that the report of your activity achieved to date is reflective of where you actually are. So they'll look to constructively challenge your approach where necessary. And if they feel more detail is required, they'll ask for that. So please do come prepared to have an in-depth conversation. And the discussion will focus on the key areas of activity within your project that link to your milestones and your KPIs, and we'll unpack those issues or barriers that you may be experiencing. And then we look forward to talk through what's needed to get your project to where it needs to be. So between you and the SPOC, you'll establish a level of confidence that you feel both is reflective and achievable, and we'll capture that in the delivery report that we produce. And should there be any underperformance against your baseline, we can work with you to identify the actions needed to put this back on track, but this will be your responsibility to action. And finally, all the content undergoes a quality review by ourselves and the delivery agent Salix to provide that certainty that the meeting accurately reflects the project health prior to that information being uploaded into the programme records. Next slide, please. So that's a more high-level, simplified version of the key steps in the monthly journey. So please note that there's a requirement for you to attach your drawdown request alongside your monthly report, and that drawdown should be looking 2 months ahead. That's based on your predictions of what your incurred spend is likely to be when delivering against your baseline. So you'll see that we plan to provide more details on that financial part of the process at a follow-up session. Next slide, please. So engagement meetings, this is the key bit for us, one of the most important aspects. So the kick-off meetings, so they allow us to get to know you and your project in more detail, and it helps you build that relationship between you and the SPOC. And just to be clear, that the SPOC is allocated to the project, not to individual consortia members. So all the meetings will be scheduled with the lead of the project, and it's the lead grant recipient's responsibility to receive and distribute the information that's discussed with the SPOC. And as part of the consortia meetings and schedules and governance arrangements that you have, you flow that information down. So SPOC allocations are underway, and we'll be confirming your allocated SPOC, as we said, before the 22nd of April, when we are looking to schedule those first meetings. And the delivery partner team will be contacting you in due course to provide you with some information and ask for your availability from the 22nd of April, when we can book those first meetings in. And that email will come from our SPOC coordinator team. They'll provide you with this available dates to schedule that meeting. Now, we're currently expecting this to be after the GFA signing deadline on the 9th of April. So once those documents are checked by the assessments team and countersigned by the department, they'll be then handed over and we'll have access to that information as well. So hopefully around about the 11th of April. But in the background, the SPOCs are going to be reviewing all the project information as it becomes available to us, so that they're primed ready for those meetings. And a key point to highlight is that we need to go over your project baseline. And we'll touch on that later in the call. So all of you should have updated this as part of your signing the GFA, and that ensures we start off on the right point for your project. But it's imperative that all of your agreements and the project plans align with the right volumes and the right financials as we start. And remember, the initial engagement meeting is an opportunity for you to discuss in detail your scheme's delivery progress and the status of the activities you've commenced since you've completed your application. And you'll cover key aspects such as risk, issues or gaps in planning, and we can discuss those as well as any updates to your project team. Next slide, please. After we've had the kick-off meeting, we have the ongoing meeting structures. So after the initial kick-off meeting, you fall into a regular cycle between you and SPOC. And attendees at those meetings could include the SPOC as well as a coordinator who may be dropping in to get some more information on the project, take notes, and you may have a regional lead attendance, sometimes at the kick-off meetings and sometimes as and when significant issues may arise. Occasionally on the calls, we'll be joined by members of the Salix delivery team, television team, as well as sometimes members of the fraud team who may drop in to talk about your fraud risk assessments. Generally, discussions at those meetings will be around your current progress. So, as I said, do come prepared to talk in detail and ideally with a position statement that covers an overview of the project plan, your key risks and issues, and your forward plan for the next month. You might also need to provide more detailed information on property numbers, types and measures, depending on the status of your project, or discuss routes to market for delivery for your contractor or your PAS 2035 roles. Please have certainty of your financial position in relation to planned spend and utilisation. It's a must in order to demonstrate that you are coordinating your activity and your achievements to the value of the activity that you're delivering. Next slide, please. Risk assessment. Okay, so most of you should be familiar with the need to produce a risk assessment for these types of projects. And SPOC will take the information you've submitted along with any supporting details from your monthly meetings, and we'll use this to discuss and document the key risk factors. So all of this feeds into the overall delivery confidence assessment that we do to inform the department of the status of your individual projects. Okay, so as well as collectively those risks against the allocation for the Wave 2.2 programme overall. Again, there's a note there that we're covering the fraud risk assessment element of this in more detail next sessions. Next slide, please. So here we've just included a few of the common risk items that we've come across through Wave 2.1. The three on the left, you should start a stress test with your supply chain at the earliest opportunity to make sure arrangements are in place to offset potential price increases, or provide confidence that your subcontractors and specialists are actually going to be available when you do need them, bearing in mind that changes to your timeline will inevitably put this supply chain at risk. So the timing of the works, it's best to make sure that it goes in accordance with our lovely climate in this country. Please try and plan the works to achieve the best of the weather. The three on the right are the ones I suggest you explore more quickly in order to avoid unnecessary project delays, particularly planning, if you are undertaking external work such as EWI. And the extent of your surveying activity and how early you can prioritise this will make a massive difference to how effectively the project baseline is maintained. If you do have any doubts in your asset data, please do get out there and complete some archetype EPCs and some detailed retrofit assessments that will better inform your delivery plan. Next slide, please. Project reporting and data validation. So what we've already touched on is the monthly reporting, the discussions that you'll be having, which are heavily dependent on your submissions being received on time. Timeliness is the key here. With the reporting process not able to run until the 10th of the 10th working day of the month, please do make all the efforts to get your reports in on time and make sure the data template is filled out as per the criteria that has been set for you. That means there's less likelihood of any delays in getting it accepted into the DMS through the portal. Now, it's our understanding that your first data submission is due to be submitted by the 14th of May. So that will follow your first kick-off meetings to look at your baseline. So you do need to set up an account to access the portal, and you should have received an email with those joining instructions for that. So please let us know if you're having any difficulties. And finally, on the right there, just to highlight that once the monthly operating reporting is complete, there will still be a requirement to complete additional project activity reporting. This will be supported by our other colleagues from the delivery partner team, who will carry out the independent assurances of grant spend, and that will be through the reconciliation that happens every 4 months, as well as the independent assurance report, which happens within 6 months of the year end, and a separate report for reasonable assurance will be generated from that. Next slide, please. So you've all received the key documents that were sent out on the 19th of March. Hopefully you're starting to become more familiar with those. And there are various items on the report tabs. Some of these are populated every month and others will come online as they need to fill in as works are completed. So the project summary tab gives us the 9 milestones, their achievement dates and their RAG ratings, along with the FTE stats on installers and apprentices. The KPI tab shows your plan to achieve those 7 KPIs and milestones, along with your capital and co-funding spend predictions. The risk register and the fraud register tabs record the details that you're tracking and updating your risks live over the months. And the property details tab does what it says on the tin. It gives you all of the information about where you're working on, what you're doing. So please pay attention to the color coding for when the cells become mandatory. Some aren't mandatory from the outset, but they will become mandatory once you add other data into those. So if you don't get that right, you could become stuck in a loop where you think you've updated it and it's ready to go, but the system isn't recognizing the right data. On the measures tab, you'll also need to include your trustmark information. So as those lodgements are put in place and you've completed those measures, each will need to be linked back through its own UPRN to the property details tab. And it's key that you make sure that those linkages are effective. Finally, your tenant details and their contact information, along with the privacy notice information and any gaps in the information that appear during the month, we can talk through and identify any blockages to getting that data. But again, please pay close attention to the guidance and definitions tabs at the front of that template, because they will help you to navigate that process. Next slide, please. So this slide just summarizes the steps that your data will go through once it's been uploaded. So there's a 2-step process, really. There's auto validation by the portal on a number of fields in advance, and there's a human QA check regarding the contents of the key cells to make sure they're showing the data in the required format. Next slide, please. Project monitoring. So this is an overview of the monthly agenda that the SPOC will go through you in a bit more detail. We've already discussed the importance of coming prepared to those meetings and being able to talk through your project health. Someone did ask on Tuesday's call if they could bring their delivery partner to the call. It's your responsibility to attend that meeting and provide those updates. It's not the delivery agent's responsibility. So if you are experiencing any delays with your project as a result of your supply chain, you may not feel comfortable in having that discussion in front of them on the call, but again, it is your choice. Also, if there's a need to book in separate sessions to discuss particular risks or issues in more details, that can be accommodated by the SPOC. And if there's a need to provide additional support around key processes or reporting activity, we can do that for you as well. Most meetings will look to be preventative in nature through the use of advisory activity, but others are in more targeted action to bring your project back into acceptable delivery. Next slide, please. So it's part of the monitoring process where we're able to identify the early warnings, the signs that affect project performance, and put in place the actions to address that. So as we touched on earlier, the data flow process, how it's received from the monthly reports into data reporting, Spot uses that to review it and produce the delivery confidence assessment. Where that DCA, the delivery confidence assessment outcome, determines there's underperformance in a project that needs addressing, so this will be reported to you, and one of the following activities on there you'll be required to adhere to. So there are a range of actions available to support you in this. So they may include the regular cadence of meetings or increasing these in the short term, and that'll help get more detailed information and track the actions. If there is a need to bring in more specialist advice, we can schedule some technical officers to attend, and they'll have expertise in particular areas to work through some problems with you. And if needed, we could put together a more intense package of support using industry specialists, depending on the need. And in the more extreme cases, a remediation plan may be required to bring your project back in line. And we'll work with you to develop that and obtain the necessary approvals to put a remediation plan in place if it's needed. But where there is an ongoing issue that can't be resolved at an operational level, then it's possible that an escalatory meeting with either Salix or the department may be required, and we'll help you work through any blockages, possibly with your senior leadership to get that unstuck. Next slide, please. Financial monitoring. So this is a reminder that there are a range of financial assessments that we undertaken alongside the operational discussions with your SPOC. The regular reconciliation process is the main temperature check of your project through your financials. That will be covered in a lot more detail in the session on the 11th of April. Next slide, please. So building on the back of the importance of good project management, similarly, it's the requirement for audit and assurance play an essential role in validating all of the delivery activity. So finances are limited, so costs do need to be monitored and they do need to be verified. And let's not forget, this is public money, as you all know, needs to be spent on public need. So the process we've got gives the confidence to government to continue to invest in these types of programs where those benefits can be quantified and realised. So it's very important that we gather that data. Next slide, please. So I'm sure that you've all considered as part of your internal controls that will support your commercial setup at some point or other. So you need to make sure you have your own teams carrying out a proportion of site inspections and obtaining the evidence for your own audit processes. So similarly, there's a requirement for the delivery partner to also conduct a sample of inspections and carry out a deep dive into site activity. And we'll follow that data trail from start to finish. We're currently in the pilot phase for these inspections for Wave 2.1. We'll be able to share the learnings from that with you in due course. But there is a thread of activity that flows through in support of identifying any errors or non-compliance, and we'll ensure that fraud is not allowed to go unchallenged. So most of the information gathering will be done remotely, and we'll request evidence from you periodically to support this process. And we've got some examples on the next slide. Okay. So as I said, we do support the evidence checks with the level of information that's required and set out in your GFA. So examples shown here are where we have delivery and quality. So this is one of the most important ones to ensure there are no legacy defects that will impact the homes of the people who need this work the most, and that we're trying to improve for them long term. We'll need evidence of lodgement with Trustmark Data Warehouse. And we'll also look at how your contracts have been procured. We'll make sure that the works delivered are in keeping with scheme rules. And we need to make sure that money's been paid out correctly. So as well as that, we'll test the allocation of spending in line with those scheme rules, and we'll collect the evidence through a sampling of your transactions. Next slide, please. So there's some quick visuals here. We can canter through some of these next few slides. So we've touched on these several times already, what they constitute parts of the DCA, but the key process that we will use is to track the risk and get ahead of risk by being focused on what your next milestone is and acting early with you on that regard. So Spot will give you a monthly report at the end of this process that will support you in having the necessary conversations you need to have, be that amongst your delivery partners or your consortium members or with the stakeholders of your own organisation. Next slide, please. So those are the KPIs. You should be familiar with those, set out in the GFA and in the monthly report. It's essential that we start to see the progression of those. So each one of those 7 KPIs, so that we have an informed understanding of your project and we can see it's progressing in line with your baseline. Next slide, please. So again, just a flow chart for the delivery confidence assessment. I won't go through this one in detail because we've talked through this a number of times, but it's just another visualization of how the process flows through to get to the point where we have your updated project baseline. So you can see that a lot of this happens initially just to set the scene, and then ongoing, it's the monthly report that's submitted and the baseline assessment. Next slide, please. So that's the component parts of your DCA and how we bring it together. So the key takeaway here is it's not just a computer generated outcome or a numbers game. The SPOC will combine several factors in order to produce an overview of your project health and its deliverability. Your data is one element and the outcomes of the review meeting are another, but also discussions that we have with you on a regular basis will inform that decision. So in real terms, this box assessment, they'll put all the information available to them to produce a score for that month's project performance. And that is assessed against your previous 1 or 2 months in order to build a picture of where the project is heading. Next slide, please. So after the meeting, we will send you a summary, an example of which is shown there on the right-hand side. And it has 5 key sections. And the most important part of that is the tier rating, which is the coloured box at the top there. Depending on the tier rating, which has got an equivalent score, they will be SPOC will be directed to highlight a range of options to you. Next slide, please. So this is the tier ratings. So generally, a light touch where project performance is good. So we'll be aiming for greens through to ambers as the preferable status. Next slide, please. But where progress does slip over a longer period, this may require a more intensive approach, such as a remediation plan, or, if necessary, some corrective action, which is expected by you. So remember that these are done on a case-by-case basis, and we'll obviously be having that dialogue with you over a number of months before we get to this point. Next slide, please. Project baseline. So coming towards the end of the presentation now, and just to highlight the importance of your baseline again, we need this to establish what the fixed point in time is in order to measure you against that. And we take that updated position that you've most recently submitted with your signed documents, and we start from there. Now, there's only a small amount of times passed between you submitting it, so we're not expecting to see any real significant change, but we need to be absolutely sure that this is still accurate at the first meeting, and SPOC will unpack that with you. Next slide, please. So just to finish, with a reminder that any documents that you may not yet have returned as part of the document signing process, so they'll be flagged to us and there will be a need to discuss those with you at the kick-off meeting. And we put a plan in place with you to ensure that those are returned completed as quickly as possible. Otherwise, that may impact the ability to launch your project and get your internal award process signed off or your contracts progressed. So that concludes the presentation for today. So I will hand back to our chair, Corey Mason.
Thanks for that presentation, Russell. We'll now be also joined by panel members Carlo Vanderblank-Jones, who's our Strategic Support Lead, Jack Dedman, who's our Assurance Director, and Emily Bennett, who's our Evidence Checks Lead. The Q&A should be largely related to today's comments, but I can see that there are some queries that are coming in related to the deadline of the 9th as well, so we'll pick those up as well. If you do have detailed questions related to your individual projects, as a reminder, please direct these to your SPOC once you've met with them or your regional lead in the interim. We'll address questions in the chat first, and then we'll move to hands up, as we're aware that the chat might not be accessible for everybody. If you appear in the chat as a guest, could you please add your name into the question so we can invite the right person to speak? And if we have any connectivity issues, I'll invite the next question and come back to you if possible. Separately, if you have any feedback on the content of the session, then please get in touch with us via the question collection form in the original comms from Salix. And at the end of the Q&A, we'll share a quick poll question in the chat. So please take a moment before leaving the chat to complete this if you can. Your feedback's really important to us, and I'll do a reminder of that when we finish the Q&A panel. So we have a couple of questions that have come in. Could I please invite Adrian Corral to pop your camera on and ask your question to the panel, please?
Hi.
Hi.
It's just I was just running through the documents over the past couple of days, and there's just some little queries I'd like to raise, and I just wondered who I get in contact with, just to because obviously the SPOC hasn't been appointed yet. So I was wondering who I need to contact just to run these things by.
And these are the documents related to the submission on the 9th, is that correct? Yeah. Is there anyone from the panel that wanted to respond to that?
So have you raised those queries through the inbox yet or not?
When you say the inbox?
Yeah, so when the documents went out, there was a linkage to a help inbox.
Right. Okay. I haven't spotted that. I haven't seen that.
Give me 5 minutes. I'll put it out the chat. Put it out the emails and put it in the chat.
Yeah.
That'd be helpful. Thanks, Russ. Okay, thank you for that. The next question was from Mark Winstanley. And again, it's related to the documents of the 9th and the forecasts.
Yeah, in today's meeting, you were talking about the application for grant drawdown being based on the forecast spend. In the agreement, it talks about it being based on incurred spend. So I just wanted to be clear, on the 10th of April, do we put an application in for forecast spend that we will incur in April and May, or do we have to wait until we've actually spent money, which might not be until May, before we draw down money?
And I can see one of the panel members nodding away there. Emily, would you like to take that one?
Yes, so it should be based on the forecast, so what you intend to incur in the following period.
Right, great. So on the 10th of April, we need to do a progress report and a drawdown request. Is that right?
Yes, a drawdown request, but yeah, what you're intending to spend in the following month.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks for that question, Mark. Now, I can't see any other questions in the chat. If you're having difficulties accessing the chat for your question, then please feel free to put up your hand and I'll just come to you in turn. Andrea Morley.
So I'm going to ask a really stupid question based on what Mark just asked, just to make sure I've understood that correctly. So I'm doing my baseline report now to submit by the end of play on the 9th of April. I will submit my drawdown request based on forecast spend in April and May for then you to check that against my monthly baseline report submission. Sorry, I've forgotten the name of the document that I will submit on the 10th working day of May to check to see what we've actually paid out, and for you then to pay out in June. Yeah. So I need to put in my drawdown request on the 9th of April what we're expected to spend in April and May. Yeah. Because I was at previous sessions we talked about putting a nil return in because we haven't yet started and we haven't got the document signed.
I can see panel members working that one through. Is there anybody that wants to take that one?
I think is there a clear time frame for the GFA signing? I think it's just got to make sure that you're happy that the GFA will be signed so that you can then start spending, and then that will be in line with your forecasts.
So the drawdown form that I need to return on the 9th, what details do I put in there?
So that should be based on what you're anticipating to spend. So yes, when you're saying it, what we anticipate to spend in April and May based on your forecast, that's correct.
Right, lovely, thank you.
Does that fully answer the question, Andrea?
It does, yeah, that's lovely. Thanks ever so much.
Okay, thank you for the question. Rafe, would you like to pop your camera on and ask the question?
Yes, it's maybe just going through the same thing that the last two questioners kind of asked. So as I understand it, it's not only all of these documents that we've received, we have to, if we think we're going to spend some money in the next 2 months, we need to do an assessment of that within all the right reporting tools within the submission on the 9th of April. I think I might have just repeated everything that somebody's just said, but it's a new thing for me to get my head round this week and liaise with all of our contractors and everything, and we can do all that. It's just like, and that's why these conversations are so fabulous. I just wanted to get my head around it. Is that right?
Shall I come in, Emily? Yeah, that's right, Rafe. So the principle is that you should be submitting your claim for what you're expecting to spend, which will be your sort of planned incurred expenditure. I mean, if you sort of sit down and you think, well, this doesn't quite make sense, then definitely submit a question as Russell described through the inbox, and we can make sure we come back to you with some detail. But the principle is absolutely right. Yeah.
Thanks, Jack. And Carla, did you want to come in there?
And
yeah, thanks, Corey. Rafe, I was just going to try and clarify some of the dates. So I believe that the 9th of April is the date for you to return the signed documents for your GFA pack. But then the 10th working day of April, so I think that works out as Monday the 15th, would be the date to upload your first data upload template and your first drawdown request. So that would happen a few days after your submission of the GFA pack.
And that's very helpful, thank you. And if the there's a difference between a forecast spend and an actual spend, if 2 months later what we considered that we thought was going to happen on the 10th day of April was actually slightly different because we're beginning it and something happened quicker, something happened slower, whatever, there's a reconciliation in the next month, so everything's constantly sort of adjusting, forecasts and actuals are adjusting, and that's okay. Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was just going to come in there and just say, yes, we understand that, what you're forecasting to spend in the next couple of months might not be exactly what you end up spending. And that's where the adjustment comes in. You're kind of adjusting your next drawdown to kind of compensate for that.
So we shouldn't hold back until we're absolutely sure we're going to spend it. It's got to be, the best guess, and then it's adjusted. Yeah.
Yes, it's a best guess forecast. We appreciate that it is a forecast. But as things change, you have that 2-month cycle to adjust it for future payments. So if you don't spend it, you can adjust your next drawdown to take that value off.
And this wonderful form that you described with the 9 or 12 tabs, Russell, that's a form that you're going to send after this meeting, or so should I have seen that?
You have that in the documents that were released out to you on the 19th.
Do you have a particular name for that? Because I haven't come across that in a bad and
hopefully
way.
It's in zip file 4. I think that zip file contains all of the documents to do with reporting and drawdowns.
Okay. I think that was a few days later. Or
sorry, that was the 22nd. Zip 4 was the 22nd of March. Yes, so you have had it. We've had confirmation. It has gone out. You've got it. So you should see it in that folder.
Incredibly helpful. Okay, lovely.
Would you like me to show you what it looks like on the screen?
No, I now remember the email that came later, and my personal administration is not what it should be, and I apologise. I will dig that out and get onto that now.
It's absolutely fine.
But you're very welcome to show it to others if other people are interested in it. It doesn't sound like a bad idea.
Well, I'll just flash it on screen just so everybody's aware what it looks like.
I think that'd be helpful. Thanks, Russell.
You should be able to see that now. That coming up?
Yep.
So that's your introduction page. The guidance I mentioned is how to fill it in is there. Definitions of what you need to put in to each fields. Project summary tab is there. So those are your milestones and KPIs. So this is your KPI forecast when you're going to achieve those. Your risk register, your fraud register, your property details tab, which has got all the information about the property and the where it was built, etc. Then you've got your measures, so what you're putting in, and then you've got your tenant details, and then you've got the last one there is your installer details. So please make sure the property details one, you look at this first column, which is your UPRN, because that UPRN needs to link through to your measures. So when you enter measures in here, this UPRN here needs to be the same. It can be the one that you have in your asset management system. It could be something completely different you want to make up, but as long as it's standardized, so you say, this is the property we're working on, and these are the measures we're fitting in that property, so that the two link together. Okay.
Thanks for that, Russell. Okay, I'll now go to Andrea Morelli. Was that a legacy hand?
No, it wasn't. Sorry, I
Okay.
didn't unmute myself. Apologies.
No
I was just talking to myself there. So yeah, I just want to clarify something that was said in an answer to Rafe there. So the grant drawdown request, you said needs to be returned by the 10th working day of each month. You mentioned there by the 10th working day of April, but on the details I'm just looking at here that was sent on your first original email with all the zip files, the grant drawdown request needs to be returned to DESNZ by 6 o'clock on the 9th of April. So am I understanding it correctly that obviously it will be the 10th working day of every month from the 14th of May, but previous to that we need to submit our initial one on the 9th of April for the next 2 months as per our forecast.
And is there a panel member that would like to pick that one up? And if not, perhaps we can come back to you on that one.
Yeah, it's just getting a bit
Yeah.
confusing. I just
Yeah.
don't want to get it wrong. That's all.
Yeah, well, what we'll do as a follow-up is we'll just outline the dates just for clarity so that there's no confusion around those dates.
That would be fab. Thank you ever so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just switching between, I think there was a hand that went up but's gone down again. So please do raise your hand again if there was something that was still outstanding. Otherwise, I can see, Russell, you've dropped the inquiries SHDF Salix Finance email address into chat.
Yeah,
So if you have very detailed queries about the documents, then please do use that inbox. Russell,
just to go back to Andrew's query, it was in the email. So there's a table in the email that went out with all the documentation, and there are, it's in the column, it's what action is required. So it has marked key documents that say please fill in, sign, return to the designators, and the grant drawdown request form is one of the documents that you do need to submit by that 9th of April deadline.
That's great. Thanks. Sorry, it was just, I think it got a bit confusing because I'm sure you said by the 10th day, but yeah, that's fab. That's what I'm working to, and that's what I'll be doing. Lovely. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for that extra clarification, Russell. There was one in the chat as well, Mark Winstanley.
It's just to say, it was mentioned about setting up a account with the Salix portal, and that we had instructions on how to do that, and I'm not sure that I've
Just
seen them.
To clarify, it's not Salix portal, it's the department's portal, it's the .gov.uk portal.
What?
So have you had no instructions on how to upload your monthly template?
If you could remind me who that would have come from, I can have a look, but I haven't seen anything that's prompted me at this point to set up an account.
What we'll do is we'll take that away and make sure that's recirculated out to everybody before the upload date.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and I can see there's a few thumbs up in the chat, and a couple of people are agreeing with that, so it may well be that there does need to be that follow-up. Thanks, Russ.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for raising that, Mark. Are there any further questions? Just pause for a second, see if anything comes through from the chat or if a hand is raised. Okay. Doesn't look like anything else is coming through. So this was our final session for this week. As we said a couple of days ago, we'll pause for a week and then we'll be back with some more sessions week after next. We're just dropping into the chat now a poll which is related to today's session. So before you leave us today, we would be very grateful if you could provide us with some feedback on the session today. We really value your input. And with that, I'd just like to say thank you to the panel members, and thank you very much to each of yourselves, the grant recipients, for joining us today and for partaking in that questions and answers session. Thank you very much and goodbye.